Charlie Kirk.
Thank you. Hello, CPAC. Great to see you guys. It's great to be in a free state. Ron DeSantis is doing such a great job, isn't he? I mean, he's been probably the greatest governor. He's been unbelievable. I want to thank CPAC for having us. It's so great to see so many grassroots activists from all across the country. There's something special happening in America right now. And a year ago when we met, things looked pretty bad. Now, I understand things don't look great, double-digit inflation, border wide open, all these crime going up. But there's something that's happened in the last 12 months that is very significant. And every single one of you have played a role in that. You could have gave up. This election, the last election, the 2020 election, was the most interfered with, corrupt election in our lifetime. And we need to say that over and over again. $400 million from Mark Zuckerberg, the inability to talk about these issues on Facebook or Google. And it would have been very easy for all of you to give up. Instead, the opposite happened, and the people in charge of our government, Hollywood, the media, they couldn't really understand why all of a sudden moms and dads kept on showing up to school board meetings across the country. They couldn't understand why all of a sudden people started to run for precinct committee positions. They couldn't understand why the energy of the conservative movement only increased when they controlled everything. And what we saw over the last year is the regime controlling every aspect of our life. Literally, whether or not and how you can breathe. Vaccination status. Let me just say one thing. No one should ever be forced to get a vaccine against their will. Period. End of story. Hard stop. And instead, we have seen an unprecedented rise of the citizen in the last 12 months. And the regime doesn't know where this is coming from. CNN's ratings are collapsing. Their top cable news hosts are taking time off. They're already getting ready. They're bracing for impact for something completely and totally historic. But I don't know about you, but I don't just want to win. I want to look at what's happening right now, and I want to be part of an extinction event for the political woke left to put them into complete and total irrelevancy for the next 20 or 30 years. Now, in order to do that, though, we as conservatives must get our priorities right. We must be very honest with each other, and our leaders must be honest with you about what really matters. You see, we are a nation in multiple crises right now. We are $30 trillion in debt. We have the most suicidal, alcohol-addicted, drug-addicted generation in history. We got a lot of problems. So we have to demand from our leaders not just solutions, but direct addressing of what actually matters. For example, the U.S. southern border matters a lot more than the Ukrainian border. In fact, I want every Republican leader that comes up on stage the next couple days to call what's happening on the southern border an invasion because 2 million people waltzed into our country this last year. I'm more worried about how the cartels are deliberately trying to infiltrate our country than a dispute 5,000 miles away, cities we can't pronounce, places that most Americans can't find on a map. Now, I'm not defending the actions of dictators halfway across the world. What I'm saying, though, is when your own country is falling apart, I don't want to hear lectures about why we need to send our troops halfway across the world when we are being invaded. Priorities. The left wants to talk about how men can become pregnant. They can't. Men are men, women are women. There's only two genders. End of story. Thanks for shopping. These are smokescreen tactics to try to distract us from the fact that we lost over 100,000 people to drug overdoses in this last year. They don't want you to talk about how the generation that I speak to, college and high school kids, They are being priced out of the housing market. They're being told to go to college to study things that don't matter, to find jobs that don't exist, to borrow money they don't have. Everything costs twice as much in most of the metropolitan areas of Phoenix and Dallas and Orlando, Miami, Tampa. No, instead, our leaders want to talk about systemic racism or climate change. The conservative movement must be very clear that we're going to talk about things that matter to our voters, matter to American families. And one of the things that we must be very clear about is how the lockdowns, the vaccine mandates, and the mask mandates was generational theft. Now, some people in this audience don't want to hear this, but it's immoral and it was wrong when we decided to deliberately hurt the younger generation to try to protect the older generation. It was a moral tragedy on this country. And our leaders need to talk about a national recovery program. We need to talk about how we can elevate young people to do the three things that create conservatives. You want to create conservatives? We all do. Make it easier to buy a home, make it easier to get married, and make it easier to have children. You have a lot more conservatives. Instead, we have a generation of renters, a generation of people that are the least married generation in history, having the least children in history, and we wonder why they find purpose in Leonardo DiCaprio, Greta Thunberg, climate change type movements. We wonder why they want to confiscate the wealth from business owners. They don't own anything. People that pay mortgages don't burn Wendy's at night. Just good rule of life. So we must demand from our leaders clear priorities of what actually matters. So we have a choice. We could do the Republican Party of old, where we do nothing but talk about corporate tax cuts for the richest people. We just talk about stopping socialism and the conversation ends there. We talk about how we need to go send our beautiful and amazing armed service members to countries that have no relevancy to our immediate future. Or, here's the amazing thing though. If our conservative leaders learn something from our wonderful 45th President of the United States and actually decide to not just talk about, but deliver some very common sense things, such as representing the muscular class, such as, how about this? The Republicans should say, what happened in Canada and what Justin Trudeau did against those Canadian truckers is a moral outrage and a human rights abuse. Where's the Republican Party been on that? So I'll say this in closing. I want to win. I don't want to win elections. That's fine. That's a small thing. Elections come and go. I want to win the civilization. I want to live in a country that is free. I want to live in a country I recognize. I want our leaders to care more about you and our fellow countrymen and our fellow citizens than some sort of abstract idea or some sort of undefined GDP number. The conservative movement is trending towards a movement that will represent 60, 70, 80% of voters of all backgrounds and all colors. It's going to require our leaders and you to make sure they do it. The citizen is rising, everybody, and the regime is falling. We're going to win. God bless you guys. Thank you so much.